Before 1793, a single enslaved person working by hand could clean about 1 pound of short staple cotton per day. The work was done with fingers. The worker sat with a pile of raw cotton bolls and pulled the sticky green seeds out of the white fiber one at a time, separating each seed from the lint that clung to it, hour after hour, from first light on until dark. The seeds were covered in a fine fuzz that gripped the fiber and would not let go. 1 pound of cleaned cotton took 10 hours of labor. 100 pounds took 100 days. The entire economy of cotton in the American South was bottlenecked at the point where human fingers met the seed, and the bottleneck was so severe that cotton was barely worth growing. In 1790, American cotton exports totaled less than 150,000 pounds. Tobacco was still the South's primary crop. Slavery was declining. Some planters were considering manumission. The economics no longer justified the institution. Then, in the spring of 1793, on a plantation outside Savannah, Georgia, a 27-year-old Yale graduate named Eli Whitney built a wooden box with a hand crank, a rotating cylinder studded with wire teeth, and a metal comb with slots too narrow for seeds to pass through. He turned the crank. The teeth caught the cotton fiber and dragged it through the comb. The seeds, too large to fit through the slots, fell away. A second cylinder fitted with brushes spun 4 times faster than the first, sweeping the cleaned fiber off the teeth and into a collection bin. In 1 hour, Whitney's machine did the work that had taken one person an entire day. He called it a cotton engine. Everyone else shortened it to cotton gin. Within a decade, American cotton exports had risen from 150,000 pounds to over 18 million. By 1850, cotton was 50% of the nation's GDP, worth more than all the manufacturing and railroad companies in America combined. The enslaved population had grown from 700,000 in 1790 to over 3 million. By 1860, it would reach 4 million. The machine that was supposed to make slavery unnecessary had made it indispensable. Whitney did not invent the cotton gin. He invented a particular cotton gin. Devices for separating cotton fiber from seed had existed for centuries. The churka, a small hand-operated machine that used 2 hardwood rollers to pinch the fiber and pull it away from the seed, had been used in India since antiquity and had traveled to the Americas with early colonists. Roller gins worked well on long staple cotton, the silky variety grown on the coastal islands of Georgia and South Carolina, because long staple seeds were smooth and separated cleanly from the fiber. But long staple cotton would only grow on the coast. The vast interior of the South, the upland regions of Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, the land that would become the Cotton Kingdom, grew short staple cotton, and short staple seeds were different. They were covered in a fine green fuzz that bonded to the fiber so tenaciously that roller gins could not separate them without destroying the lint. Short staple cotton had to be cleaned by hand, which meant it had to be cleaned by enslaved people, which meant the scale of production was limited by the speed of human fingers. Whitney's innovation was to replace the pinching action of the rollers with a tearing action. His wire teeth did not squeeze the seed out of the fiber. They hooked the fiber and ripped it through a grate, leaving the seed behind. The distinction mattered because it meant the gin could process short staple cotton at industrial speed for the first time. Whitney claimed his prototype could clean 2,500 pounds per day, using only 2 workers to feed it. Even if the number was exaggerated, the magnitude of the improvement was real. A hand-cranked gin operated by enslaved workers could produce 50 pounds of cleaned cotton per day. A larger gin driven by horse, water, or eventually steam could produce hundreds. The saw gin came next. Within 3 years of Whitney's patent, other inventors had replaced his wire teeth with circular saw blades mounted on the rotating cylinder. Hodgin Holmes patented the saw gin in 1796, and despite years of legal battles in which Whitney eventually prevailed, the saw gin became the dominant design. By the early 1800s, cotton gins across the South used rows of circular saws spinning on a common shaft, each saw passing between the ribs of an iron breastwork, each tooth catching cotton fiber and dragging it through the gap, while the seeds were held back and fell into a collection hopper. The machine was loud. The saws screamed against the iron ribs. Cotton dust filled the air in a white cloud so thick that gin operators worked in a haze of fiber that coated their skin, clogged their throats, and settled in their lungs with every breath. The people who operated the gins were enslaved. The people who fed cotton into the gins were enslaved. The people who cleaned the gins, maintained them, replaced the saws when they dulled, and baled the cleaned cotton for shipment were enslaved. The GIN house on a large plantation was a wooden building, poorly ventilated, filled with machinery that had no guards, no safety mechanisms, and no emergency stops. The saw cylinders rotated continuously while workers fed raw cotton into the hopper by hand, pushing the bowls toward the spinning teeth. The teeth caught whatever they touched: cotton fiber, cotton seed, and anything else that entered the hopper. A hand that slipped too close to the saws was caught by the teeth and pulled toward the breastwork. The breastwork slots were too narrow for a hand to pass through, but the saws were not too narrow to strip skin from fingers. Workers lost fingers. Workers lost hands. Workers were scalped when hair was caught by the rotating cylinder. Workers breathed cotton dust until their lungs hardened and their breathing became a permanent wheeze that the medical profession would not formally recognize as cyanosis until the 20th century. More than 100 years after the first gins began filling gin houses with fiber-laden air. None of these injuries were recorded in any systematic way because the people who suffered them were property, and the damage done to property was an economic loss, not a public health event. But the cotton gin's real body count was not mechanical. It was systemic. The gin made cotton so profitable that it reversed the trajectory of slavery in America. Before 1793, the institution was in decline. The soil in the Chesapeake was exhausted from decades of tobacco cultivation. Planters were diversifying into wheat and other crops that required less labor. The price of enslaved people was falling. The ideals of the Revolution, however imperfectly applied, had created political momentum toward gradual emancipation, and several northern states had already begun the process. The gin stopped all of it. Cotton grew easily in the upland South on land that was cheap and abundant, and the gin made it possible to process that cotton at a profit for the first time. Land that had been considered marginal was suddenly valuable. Planters, who had been considering freeing their enslaved workers, discovered that those workers were now worth more than ever. The internal slave trade, the forced movement of enslaved people from the Upper South to the cotton plantations of the Deep South, became one of the largest forced migrations in American history. Families were broken apart. Men, women, and children were sold at auction in Virginia and Maryland and marched in chains to Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana to clear land and plant cotton for owners they had never met on soil they had never seen. The Louisiana Purchase of 1803 opened the Mississippi River Valley, and cotton planters flooded into it. The Indian Removal Act of 1830 cleared the remaining indigenous peoples from the southeastern United States to make room for more cotton land. Every acre of new plantation required more enslaved labor to work it, and the gin ensured that every acre of cotton produced was profitable enough to justify the purchase of more human beings. The numbers are staggering. In 1790, the United States produced about 3,000 bales of cotton. By 1830, it produced 750,000. By 1850, it produced 2.85 million. By 1860, the southern states were producing 75% of the world's cotton supply, and the American South was the most profitable agricultural region on Earth. Cotton was shipped to textile mills in New England and England, where it was spun into cloth on machines powered by water and steam, cloth that clothed the workers who built the railroads and the factories in the cities of the industrial age. The entire system ran on cotton, and cotton ran on slavery, and slavery ran on the cotton gin. Whitney's simple wooden box with its wire teeth and hand crank had set in motion an economic engine that consumed 4 million human lives and required a civil war to stop. Whitney himself saw almost none of the money. His patent was pirated immediately. Planters broke into his workshop before he had finished building the prototype, examined the machine, and copied it. Within weeks of his first demonstration, more cotton was planted across Georgia than Whitney could have ginned in a year of manufacturing. He spent the next decade in litigation, won most of the lawsuits, and collected almost nothing. Congress refused to renew his patent in 1812. He made roughly $90,000 in total from the invention, most of it consumed by legal fees. He turned his back on cotton in the South forever and moved to New Haven, Connecticut, where he built a gun factory and developed the concept of interchangeable parts that would become the foundation of American mass production. He died in 1825 at 59, having invented the machine that created the Cotton Kingdom, expanded slavery by several million human beings, and set the conditions for a war that would kill over 600,000 Americans. He made less money from it than a moderately successful cotton planter made in a single good year. The cotton gin did not cause slavery. Slavery existed for nearly 2 centuries before Whitney was born. But the gin transformed slavery from a declining institution into an expanding one, from a regional system into a continental one, from an economic arrangement that some considered temporary into a permanent foundation of national wealth. It did this not by making the work of enslaved people easier, but by making that work more valuable. The gin eliminated the bottleneck of seed removal. It did nothing to eliminate the back-breaking labor of planting, cultivating, and picking cotton by hand, labor that remained entirely dependent on human bodies working in the fields under the southern sun. Enslaved people picked 200 pounds of cotton per day and faced violence if they did not meet their quotas. The gin processed that cotton into a commodity that could be sold on the world market at a profit that justified every dollar spent on the system that produced it, the purchase price of the human beings, the cost of feeding and housing them at subsistence levels, the cost of the overseers who enforced the pace, the cost of the whips and the chains and the auction blocks, and the laws that made it all legal. The cotton gin was the machine that made the math work. It was the machine that turned human suffering into a balance sheet and made the balance sheet add up. If this is the kind of history that stays with you, subscribe. There are more machines like this one, and every one of them left a body count the world forgot.